Sabar ya.
Nggak apa-apa. Meeting ID-nya berapa?
Credible and objective research methods have been very important. One approach that can be used is evidence synthesis and systematic reviews. That's why today we will explore how this method allows researchers, academics, and practitioners to systematically gather, assess, and analyze various studies, resulting in evidence-based, objective, and reliable writing. Before we proceed to the main event, I would like to share some guidelines that all participants needs to follow during the webinar. First, participants are expected to remain on the Zoom meetings platform and avoid entering and leaving during the webinar. Second, participants are encouraged to turn their cameras throughout the webinar and keep their audio muted unless invited by the MC or moderator to unmute. Third, participants are not allowed to cause disturbances or create situations that could potentially lead to disruptions. Next, we will watch a profile video from EHA Institute and ERCA School by Ruangkreatif. To the operator, please proceed.
Dari aktivitas manusia menyebabkan efek pemanasan. Dan yang ini dengan panas matahari biasanya sehingga suhu bumi meningkat. Di tengah perkembangan zaman, masih banyak masyarakat yang kurang peduli terhadap lingkungan. Tanpa kecelakaan, polusi alam, dan terus meningkat. Saya menjawab banyak yang menganggap ini sebagai hal sepele tanpa menyadari dampak buruknya bagi kehidupan. EHA Institute adalah organisasi non-profit yang berfokus pada riset, penelitian, dan pengembangan bidang sains, teknologi, serta lingkungan dan pariwisata. Berkomitmen untuk berkonservasi dan produktif dan dalam pengkajian teknologi pembangunan serta program pemberdayaan serta ekosistem yang organisasi ini berupaya memberikan kontribusi nyata dalam menghadapi tantangan global. Dan teknologi berkualitas. Pemberdayaan masyarakat bertujuan untuk mendorong praktik berkelanjutan melalui program pemberdayaan masyarakat berbasis sains, teknologi, dan lingkungan dengan meningkatkan kolaborasi, program penyitaan dan kolaborasi. Sama dengan ternyata seluruhnya di mana sampah dikelola dari jika masalah tersebut akan kita kehidupan yang lebih baik buat kita. Jika sampah dikelola dengan baik, kota-kota akan bersih dan nyaman. Sungai dan laut tidak lagi dipenuhi plastik sehingga ekosistem air dapat pulih. Jika polusi udara berkurang, kualitas hidup manusia meningkat, pernapasan menjadi lebih mudah, dan seperti asma dan paru-paru menurun, dan kita bisa menikmati langit yang lebih. Ketika efek rumah kaca terkendali, suhu bumi tidak akan meningkat secara drastis. Cuaca menjadi lebih stabil, banjir dan kekeringan pun berkurang. Lingkungan yang bersih dan sehat juga berdampak positif pada perekonomian. Jika kita berhasil mengatasi masalah lingkungan, anak cucu kita akan mewarisi bumi yang lebih hijau dan layak huni. Semua dampak positif ini bisa terwujud jika kita mulai peduli dan menindak sekarang. Tiap langkah kecil seperti buang sampah pada tempatnya, mengurangi penggunaan plastik, serta memilih energi ramah lingkungan akan membawa perubahan besar. Mari bersama-sama menciptakan dunia yang lebih bersih, sehat, dan nyaman untuk kita sendiri.
Okay, thank you to the operator. Aside from the introductions from EHA Institute and ERKA School by Ruangkreatif, please allow me to briefly introduce Envisaf KMUI. Envisaf KMUI, or Environmental Health Student Association, is the student association of the Department of Environmental Health, Faculty of Public Health, University of Indonesia. This year, Envisaf KMUI presents the theme Green Society, a concept that promotes an environmentally friendly and sustainable lifestyle, aligning with SDGs 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. This concept is highly relevant to the environmental health science, which focus on preventing environmental pollution and improving public health quality. Through this major theme, Envisaf KMUI aims to become an agent of change by applying environmental health knowledge to address environmental and public health issues. Now, we will proceed to the main event that everyone has been waiting for. But before that, let me introduce our moderator for today, Ms. Fitri Kurniasari, SKMM KKK, Ph.D. Ms. Fitri is a lecturer in the Department of Environmental Health, Faculty of Public Health, University of Indonesia. In addition to her role as a lecturer, she is also a researcher at the Research Center for Industrial and Environmental Health Studies, Faculty of Public Health, University of Indonesia. Ms. Fitri has also been involved in several research projects as displayed on the screen. Without any further ado, let's welcome Ms. Fitri as our moderator for today. To Ms. Fitri, the floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you for Ms. Xiaomi for your introduction. So today we are going to have our second webinar from EHA Institute. It's about the introduction to evidence synthesis and systematic review. So welcome to our second webinar for all the participants. And here we have very respected speakers, Mr. Saif-Ur-Rahman. Next. So Mr. Saif-Ur-Rahman is my friend, actually. We were taking the PhD at the same university, Nagoya University Graduate School of Medicine in Japan from 2018 at around 2022. His lab was just beside of my lab. So after finishing his PhD, then she moved to Ireland to be a senior researcher methodologist in the Evidence Synthesis Ireland and also Cochrane Ireland at the University of Galway in Galway, Ireland. So his publication is also mostly about the systematic review, meta-analysis. So he will be the suitable speaker for us and we can learn a lot from him. So just make sure you take a note of everything. And I think at the end of the presentation, he will give us at around 30 or 40 minutes presentation, and then we will continue to the quick question and answer session. And then after that, just we will have summary at the end. So please welcome to our notable speaker, Dr. Saif-Ur-Rahman. So how are you, Dr. Saif?
Thanks, Siri. I'm good. I hope everyone present in this webinar are good as well.
Yeah, so now in Ireland, I think at around 9 or 10 a.m. in the morning.
This morning,
Isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah, but in Jakarta is almost 5 p.m. So I think, yeah, we have 7 hour or 8 hours gap. So thank you for agreeing for become our speaker today. So you may start your presentation from now. Thank you, Dr. Saif.
Okay, thank you. I'm
Okay.
sharing my screen, but yeah. Okay, now I'm sharing my screen. Just let me know whether you can see my screen or not. And
Yeah, it's fine. We can see clearly.
yeah, and it's moving, right?
Yeah, it's moving.
Yeah. And just want to share that if you have any question, even during the presentation, you can provide those questions in the chat. And or if it is something urgent, you can just raise your hand and ask the question, even in between the presentation. That's fine. So as Sari mentioned, that today we will be talking about evidence synthesis, mostly systematic reviews, but systematic review is a form of evidence synthesis. So I will share a bit about myself. So as mentioned, I'm Saif. I work as a senior research methodologist with Evidence Synthesis Ireland and Cochrane Ireland. And I'm a research fellow at the Center for Health Research Methods at University of Galway. I'm the vice chair of the Research Ethics Committee at University of Galway. I'm a member of a couple of evidence synthesis methods group, like Cochrane Evidence Synthesis Methods Group, great working group member. I'm also an associate editor at the BMC Systematic Reviews, which is a specific journal for evidence synthesis and systematic reviews. So the thing that I was saying that we have different types of evidence synthesis. Actually, what is evidence synthesis? Evidence synthesis is synthesizing the available evidence to generate precise information. And evidence synthesis or systematic reviews, these are not just done for having a mere publication. Rather, it has an importance. So we usually do evidence synthesis or systematic reviews to provide the best evidence, to know about the most precise evidence. And it helps in decision making. It helps in policy decision. It helps in clinical decision. So thus, usually evidence synthesis are commissioned by different guideline development bodies, different policy making bodies. It could be at national level, it could be at international level. Possibly many of you know that the World Health Organization or the Center for Disease Controls like US CDC or European Center for Disease Control, they have many guidelines on different diseases, on different topics. And all these guidelines are actually developed through the evidence synthesis. And in the evidence synthesis, what we do is actually we explore all the related studies on that specific topic and then summarize, synthesize, critically appraise, and then provide the precise evidence along with its methodological limitations or any uncertainty across the evidence. So we will be talking all those things briefly in today's webinar because this is not possible to cover everything just within a webinar. And evidence synthesis is actually a totally different area of science. And for example, we run a master's course that is 1 year regular master's, and the master's is known as the evidence-based future healthcare. And there's a module which I lead, which is the art and science of evidence synthesis, and it's actually a 4 months module, 16 weeks or 4 months module. So we teach evidence synthesis in 4 months in a master's module, and even many of our students are doing PhD on evidence synthesis. So today we will just very briefly talk about the types or steps, basic steps of evidence synthesis or systematic reviews. So before going to the types, you can see here a couple of questions which are evidence synthesis questions. The first question is asking about a medicine, whether it is effective for the treatments of Alzheimer's disease or not. The second question is, what is the effect of non-pharmacological intervention for the prevention of hypertension in low and middle income countries? And the third is, what is the effect of pharmacological intervention for the treatment of people with post-COVID condition or PCC? So as you can see, all these questions are asking the effectiveness of a medicine or effectiveness of an intervention. So if your research question for evidence synthesis is asking the effectiveness of intervention, then usually it's a systematic review and meta-analysis. But we have other types of evidence synthesis too, and there's loads of different types of evidence synthesis. I have mentioned only a couple of them here, but there are at least more than 44 distinct type of evidence synthesis. Very recently, we conducted a methodological work where we identified there are more than 1,000 terms related to evidence synthesis. So this is very broad. But the major types are like this. The basic one is the systematic review and meta-analysis. There are scoping reviews, rapid reviews, umbrella reviews, mixed method reviews, qualitative evidence synthesis or QES, mapping reviews, evidence gap maps. So many different types of evidence synthesis. There's a specific tool which is available online, and if you just Google it, writing right review tool, you will get this tool. So this tool is a web-based tool which guides the review authors to know about the type of evidence synthesis. So they have some questions, they have their prompts. They will ask Is your question related to the effectiveness of intervention? If you provide yes or no, and then they will ask, then are you working on a single intervention or multiple intervention? Do you have a comparator? Do you have any resource constraints? So based on these questions, they will give you the type of evidence synthesis. So this is just helpful for young researchers or who plan to do an evidence synthesis. So you can check with your question applying to the right review tool and get an idea about what should be the appropriate type for your evidence synthesis or not. Then, as I mentioned, that there are different types of evidence synthesis. One of them is a scoping review. So sometimes people are really a bit confused when to do a scoping review or when to do a systematic review. Often it is, misperceived that a scoping review is a poorly conducted systematic review, or when you cannot conduct all the steps of systematic review appropriately, then you name it as a scoping review. So this is totally incorrect. This is wrong. Actually, all sort of evidence synthesis has its own methodological robustness, and each and every type follows very specific standard methods. So the differentiation is actually depends on the scope of the evidence synthesis. So usually we do a scoping review if we want to know what is there, what is the research gap, or if you want to generate a hypothesis. So then we go for a scoping review. And as mentioned earlier, if your review question is to know about the effectiveness of an intervention, then it is usually a systematic review. So this is the basic differentiation. There are some other differences, but I'm telling about the conceptual differentiation. So it totally different based on the scope of the work. But methodologically is similar, the robustness is similar. There are some difference in the methods, but it's pretty similar robust method, both for the scoping review and the systematic review. Then again, we have other types of reviews and which are called together as a big picture family. These are pretty similar, like scoping reviews, mapping reviews, and evidence gap maps. So all these three types of evidence synthesis, they explore what is there. They're exploratory reviews, but still there are differences. For example, if you're, as I mentioned, in a scoping review, you want to know what is there. But if your focus is broad and you are exploring a narrow topic or a narrow question within a broad focus, then it's scoping review. If you are exploring a broader topic or broader question within a broad focus, then it's a mapping review or evidence gap map. So here again, the main difference is the conceptual difference. But in evidence gap maps, there are some additional things, like we use this kind of maps. So this is one of the evidence gap map that we conducted years ago, back in 2018, and it was on primary healthcare policy and governance. And through the evidence gap map, we generated this kind of a map, and this is actually an interactive map. I'm just showing the picture of the map, but it is interactive map. So when you hover over the bubbles, they show how many articles are there within this bubble. And this is based on an intervention and outcome framework. And for each intervention and outcome, how many articles are there, how many systematic reviews are there, this is visualized through this interactive gap map. And when you click on it, you get the details of that article, and you can also export the data from this. So this is something different. Similarly, we can use this kind of map and scoping reviews as well. As I mentioned, that scoping reviews and mapping reviews and evidence gap map, they're known as the big picture family. So they're same, but different. So the focus of the scoping review is a bit narrow, but within a scoping review, we can also use this kind of map. Similarly, we use this scoping review. This was a very important scoping review, which was commissioned by the World Health Organization. And we utilized this kind of a map for that scoping review. It was based on the SARS-CoV testing strategies. So we demonstrated here for different testing strategies, what are the outcomes and how many articles are there or how many studies are there based on each testing strategy and their corresponding outcomes. Again, there are other types of evidence synthesis. I will not go through all of them, but I'm just showing you another very important type, which is called the rapid review. Similar to the scoping review, sometimes people think that rapid review, again, is a poorly conducted systematic review, or it's a very rapidly conducted systematic review, which is incorrect. Rapid review is with same methodological robustness. But when do we conduct a rapid review? So you see that we have authored this methodological paper and published this in the Journal of Clinical Epidemiology, and you will get the key concepts of rapid reviews in this paper. There are other series of rapid review methods paper, and it's also methodologically robust. We only do rapid reviews if there is an urgent need for evidence. Sometimes, for example, during the COVID-19, there was an urgent need of evidence synthesis. And many guideline development groups like WHO or CDC, they commissioned many rapid reviews because that time rapid reviews were like necessary for getting evidence within a shorter period of time. So when we conduct rapid reviews, it doesn't mean that we do it very rapidly or it depends on time. It's actually streamlining the standard methodological process. And for that reason, some of the methodological aspects are streamlined to get better evidence within a shorter period of time. So all these aspects are robust and transparent and clearly described in the methodological papers. So now we will talk about the steps of evidence synthesis. As I mentioned earlier, that the overall step for all type of evidence synthesis, including systematic review, meta-analysis, scoping review, rapid review, evidence gap map, are pretty much similar. There are some differences, but the basic steps are pretty much similar and with similar robustness. So within the very basic steps or the key steps of evidence synthesis, the first one is to define the question, then plan the eligibility criteria, then plan the method, then search for studies, apply the eligibility criteria and screen, extract the data, assess risk of bias, analyze and present, and interpret the result. Also, update if necessary. So we will be talking about all these steps one by one. So the first step, as I mentioned, is the defining the question. So which is the very important step. If you do not have a very good question, you will not be able to conduct evidence synthesis. And you need to consider whether you are doing a duplication or not, or whether there are primary studies or not. For example, if you do not have available primary studies, you cannot do an evidence synthesis. If you do not have if you have already published systematic reviews on that question, so you cannot do an evidence synthesis because it will be a duplication. And this is a very time-consuming, resource utilizing process and robust process, and you need not to do a duplication. So you need to identify your question based on the research need, research gap, and then you need to register this. This is another important aspect. And usually we register the systematic reviews in Prospero known as the prospective registration of the systematic review, but they do not take the registration of a scoping review. So another platform called Open Science Framework, or OSF, they take the registration of scoping reviews. And registration is important so that it can prevent the deduplication. As I mentioned, when you try to conduct a systematic review or evidence synthesis, initially you need to identify whether there is already an existing one or not. If there's an existing one, so you cannot do it, or you should not do it because it will be duplication. Apart from Prospero, if you do a Cochrane systematic review or Campbell systematic review, then those are registered within Cochrane and Campbell platform. So Cochrane, Campbell, these are the methodological hub. Those provide the method for conducting systematic reviews. And Cochrane systematic reviews are known as the best ever evidence that is produced and for their methodological robustness. And if you conduct a Cochrane systematic review, it will be initially registered. And you may ask that how can you do a Cochrane systematic review? Like there are different Cochrane groups, or if you are interested, you can communicate with the Cochrane editorial system. Then you need to provide the proposal first. And if they think that, well, this is doable, then they will accept the proposal. Then you will register it and they will go for the protocol and so on. So after registration, next is you plan for your eligibility criteria and you plan for your method. That means you develop your protocol. In systematic reviews, we do not do anything without having it in the protocol. So all of your plans should be very well written at the very beginning, and you need to have your protocol. You should tell what are your eligibility criteria, which studies will you be including, which studies will you be excluding, why will you be excluding those. You need to tell your screening process, you need to tell your data extraction process, you need to specify your outcomes, that which outcomes will you be looking at, and you need to specify your synthesis method, that which method we will be conducting and which method we will be utilizing for the synthesis in advance at the protocol stage. So we do not exclude anything after seeing the result. We do not do anything after seeing the available articles. We plan the method at the protocol stage, and then we transparently report that no matter what, we get our desired findings or not. So that's why the protocol should be there in advance, so that you cannot deviate. You cannot be deviated from the protocol, you cannot manipulate the protocol, or you remain transparent throughout the process. Well, there might be some sort of deviation in the protocol in some cases. For example, maybe in the protocol you have not mentioned about a specific analysis, but after conducting the evidence synthesis, maybe the guideline development group has requested you for doing a specific kind of analysis, then you can do that. But those deviations should be amended in the protocol, and there should be the clear description of the total deviation from the protocol and the reported systematic reviews. So it's all about transparent reporting. Then the protocol could be published. As you can see here, a couple of protocols that we have published previously, one for a systematic review meta-analysis, one for evidence gap map. So not all journals publish the protocols, but some journals like BMJ Open, BMC Systematic Review, they publish the systematic review protocols. Again, publication of protocol is important sometimes because you have your protocol, so it becomes transparent. So whenever you report the systematic review, so even the peer reviewers knows that, well, this was your protocol, this was your mentioned method, and you have done accordingly. So you haven't been deviated from your protocol. But even if you do not publish it, if you register it in Prospero, that is also a document where your methodological aspect is available, and that is open access. So depending on your status, like if you have funding for publishing the protocol, or even if you get waiver for the publication, you can go for the publication of the protocol. And this is, to be honest, good in a sense that you have the documentation of your protocol published in journal. Then you need to do the search. Search means based on your review question, we usually think about the population and intervention, comparison and outcome, then develop our search strategy. And your search should be comprehensive. Your search should cover all the related studies, almost all, because you cannot cover all, you cannot cover 100%, but almost all. That's why your search strategy needs to be comprehensive and robust. And there are methodological guidance on developing such strategies. You can see the papers here. So these are the methodological guidance for developing the search strategy. And search is usually done by an information specialist or search specialist. And there should be an information specialist in your team before conducting the search. Usually the library personnel or information specialists, they are experienced in search, and they should have the training on search for systematic reviews as well. And the search strategies should be provided with your systematic reviews, like search strategy for different databases should be provided, and it should be replicable. So whenever as a reviewer or as an editor, I deal with a manuscript. So if the search is not replicable, so we usually do not accept that for publication, because every aspect of a systematic review should be replicable so that anyone try to replicate it can produce the same result. So if your search is not good, not replicable, it will not be published, or it will not be considered as a good search for a systematic review. So this PRAISE or peer review of electronic search strategy guideline statement that gives you how to provide a very comprehensive search strategy, or how to develop a comprehensive search strategy. Again, detailing on search needs lot many aspects, lot many discussions, but I'm not going through that detail, but just mentioning that the search should be comprehensive. It should cover many databases, including Medline, Web of Science, Scopus, Embase, and you should search gray literature as well. You should search trial registries. So search is very important component, and you need to make your search robust. You need to make your search comprehensive, and you need to try to cover at least almost everything on that topic of your interest. And then after the search, you apply your eligibility criteria. As I mentioned during the protocol, you specify your inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria, and then you apply this. And after applying this, you consider the inclusion of these studies in your systematic review. So for this process, which is known as screening, there are different softwares. So screening is done in two steps. One is the title abstract screening. So initially when you search, maybe you have 10,000, 12,000, 5,000 articles. Then at first stage, you screen through reading through the title and abstract, and then apply your eligibility criteria, and then either exclude them or include them. Then you include them at the full text stage, and then you read the full text and apply your eligibility criteria, and again, include them for the final data extraction. And these two stages could be done using this kind of softwares, which one is known as RAN and the other one is Covidence. Both are good, but the Covidence is I just want to make sure that I do not have any interest with Ryan or Covidence. I do not share, hold their share or anything, but these two that I often use for evidence synthesis. The problem with Covidence is not problem, but the thing is in Covidence is paid software, so you cannot use it unless you get a license for them. Sometimes different institutions, specifically if it is a university, they have the institutional license so that their students, specifically the PhD students, can get benefit from Covidence. Ryan has also the paid version, but they have the free version as well. And the free version could be utilized. Like in Covidence, they have a trial version, but in the trial version, you cannot do a systematic review, or you cannot screen for a systematic review. But in Ryan, in the free version, you can screen for a systematic review, even 10,000, 20,000, no limit. So I have done many systematic reviews which were conducted voluntarily and there was no funding. So we used Ryan in that case because it was free and we could do. The only problem with Ryan free version is that the deduplication, like when you grab or retrieve articles from different databases, there might be different duplications from same article comes from different databases. And this deduplication is done automatically in the paid version, but in the free version, you need to do this manually one by one. So that is one limitation. Otherwise, the free version is okay to use. And as mentioned that in the full text screening process, you need to mention the reasons for exclusion of your article. So for which reason have you mentioned? And I wrote a methodological paper on this, which technique is known as a prioritization and sequential exclusion of articles in systematic reviews. Like when we exclude the articles, we at the protocol stage, we prioritize our exclusion criteria, and then we apply that sequentially for mentioning the reason for exclusion at the full text screening phase. Then after having those articles included, you need to extract your data, and data is extracted as like the screening process. It is also done by two persons independently. So the screening process, data extraction process, these are done by two persons independently so that it is not biased. And usually if there is a conflict, that is resolved by a third person. And data extraction is done in pilot tested forms. And it could be a Word document, it could be Excel document, but it's better to use the Word document because you can edit, you can have comments, you can make it in track changes form. So it's good for record keeping. And two independent authors, they extract the data from the same article independently and then match. And if there is any conflict, then that is resolved through discussion or through engagement of a third review author. So this practical guide provided by Covidence, this is freely available. So if you look at this, you can get the essence of how to extract data for intervention systematic reviews. Also, there's Cochrane handbook where you will get the details of how to extract data. And for data extraction, you can use Covidence software again, but they have their own template. Also, there's possibility that you can update that template, you can modify that template. But in my opinion, it's always better to extract the data using a Word document. As I mentioned, it is good for record keeping, and you can edit, you can use the track changes mode so that when you resolve the conflict, you can keep all track of your progress. And this is really good for record keeping. After data extraction, the next step is assess the risk of bias. So risk of bias means you assess whether there is any risk of bias in the studies. And you know the bias is the systematic error that deviates the results, which is not by chance. And actually for assessing risk of bias, what we look at it is called the internal validity. That means whether the studies have measured the thing that was supposed to be measured. And by looking at the internal validity, we assess the risk of bias. And for risk of bias, there are different tools for different study designs. For example, for randomized control trials, there's Cochrane risk of bias tool. So Cochrane ROB tool was the primary version. Now the advanced version is there, Cochrane ROB2. So both could be utilized, but it's better to use the Cochrane ROB2. Similarly for NRSIs, that means the non-randomized studies of interventions, which are before after study, quasi experimental study, or case control study and cohort study. For those, we could use the Robbins I tool. This is for assessing the risk of bias of non-randomized studies of intervention. There are other checklists and several checklists, but there are differences between quality assessment checklist and risk of bias. Our main purpose is to assess the risk of bias. So everything in evidence synthesis and systematic review is done with a purpose. So the purpose of the risk of bias assessment is to look at the internal validity, and it is utilized in the assessment of the certainty of the evidence. So quality assessment doesn't fulfill that purpose actually, so it's preferable and is recommended that we use risk of bias assessment in the systematic reviews. Well, for other types of evidence synthesis where we do not explore the effectiveness of intervention and where we do not make a recommendation and where we do not assess the certainty of evidence, maybe you can use the quality assessment checklist. But for systematic reviews of intervention, we should assess the risk of bias using these standardized tools. And again, this risk of bias assessment is done independently by two persons. And if there is a conflict within any assessment, then that should be resolved through the discussion or with a third person. Then after the risk of bias, you need to analyze and present your data if it is an effectiveness of intervention, and if your data supports the assumptions of meta-analysis, then you should go for a meta-analysis. And this is how a meta-analysis looks like. This is called a forest plot because it looks like a forest. And here the diamond, shows the pooled estimate. And from a forest plot, actually, this is the forest plot, and you get many information like how many studies are there, you get the individual number of events on each intervention group and the control group, and the total number of participants in intervention group and control group. You get the individual risk ratios for the individual studies, and you get the pooled risk ratio. Also, you get the total number of participants, and you get the heterogeneity, that I square is 0. So many things. So from a forest plot, you get a lot many information, and you need to know how to interpret this. And as I mentioned, that after combining the results, pulling these results, you get this pooled evidence. And actually, sometimes you cannot do a meta-analysis, but in that case, you need to do synthesis without meta-analysis, which is known as SWIM, where you might present the results narratively, because there are some assumptions. If the intervention is similar, if the outcome measurement is similar, only then you can do a meta-analysis. Otherwise, you cannot do meta-analysis. You cannot mix apples with oranges. Otherwise, it will be garbage in and garbage out. So you need to be cautious about that as well. And finally, you need to interpret a result that I was mentioning, which is called grade. So grade is a process where you assess the certainty of evidence, the result that you generated from your meta-analysis or from your synthesis. Then you grade how certain you are, how confident you are on this assessment. And you grade this evidence with high confidence, moderate confidence, low confidence, very low confidence. So this is very much important for guideline development. So when you grade your evidence, and if your certainty of evidence is high, then the guideline development group, they might be interested to recommend this. If you have a very low or very low certainty of evidence, then maybe it could be like they should wait for further research, or they should wait for more evidence. If it is somehow moderate, then maybe it could be utilized in emergency setup for emergency purpose, but still we need more research on that. So that's how grade helps in decision-making process, in clinical decision-making and policy decision-making. And finally, another aspect of evidence synthesis is that it's just not your responsibility is not just done after finishing it and publishing it. You need to update it after a regular interval if this is on a very important topic, and until you get the high certainty of evidence, or if there is new research on that topic, so it should be updated and your evidence should be updated as well. So as I mentioned briefly about the method, but there are still some methodological uncertainties, and those uncertainties are resolved through study within a review or SOAR. So we lead the SOAR program and we do studies within reviews. So these are methodological studies that refine the methods of evidence synthesis. And thus the evidence synthesis methods are so robust, and it's actually provide us the best evidence. And also, these methods are finalized through methodological studies and very robust process. The final thing that I want to say is to be aware of research waste. So many times, even in very good journals, you might see things tagged as systematic reviews, which are not actually following the standard methods, because not all journal editors and not all peer reviewers are very well informed about the evidence synthesis method. So sometimes you will see that maybe in very good journal, systematic reviews have been published where the screening process or the data extraction process was not done by two independent persons, the search was very poor, or they didn't assess the risk of bias assessment, or they didn't do the certainty of evidence assessment, but still those has been published. So we cannot prevent that, because publication is another business, and it depends on many things. But it is our responsibility as a researcher, as a peer reviewer, as an editor, to publish standard things, to conduct standard research, to conduct a standard evidence synthesis, and it is our responsibility to prevent the publication of methodologically flawed systematic reviews or evidence synthesis. So that was my overall talk on evidence synthesis. Thank you all, and welcome any question.
Okay, thank you so much, Saif, for giving us very insightful explanation. So before that, I was thinking that evidence synthesis is just all about the systematic review and meta-analysis. But after your explanation, then I realized that it's very broad. There is a systematic review, scoping review, rapid review, which is all of them are very robust methodologies. And there are some steps. One of them is assessing the risk of bias, and it's very systematically, and we trying to understand that steps, and we can publish a good journal after your explanation, I guess. So we open for the question and answer sessions. Any question from the participants? You may ask in Indonesian language, or you may also ask in English. So just feel free. We will trying to translate your question to Saif. Jika ada yang mau bertanya bahasa Indonesia, dipersilahkan. Kalau mau bahasa Inggris juga dipersilahkan, teman-teman, Bapak Ibu sekalian. Okay. Or you may also ask the question in chat box.
You can ask anything, any confusion, any question, anything.
Hi, I would like to
Okay.
ask questions, sir. I'm Ratna from S2 Cars. Is it possible? Sorry, I not open my camera. Okay. How much do we responsible for our study after we publish? I mean, you mentioned that we have to follow if there is new evidence, and how long should we follow that kind of topics? Thank you.
Did you mean about the update? So
Yes.
the thing is, if you conduct a Cochrane review, or if you conduct a Campbell review, so usually they remind you that, well, you need to update this systematic review or something like that. If it is done by yourself, it's not a Cochrane review or not a Cochrane Campbell review, you could take a cutoff point like for 5 years or 10 years if you want to update. It's not mandatory that you should update, but sometimes, if you see that, well, there are new evidence on this, and your previous evidence synthesis is not actually representing the current situation, then you can update. And you may have a look for over 3 years or 5 years whether there is a necessity for update or not. Yep. But usually the Cochrane reviews, those are updated after 5 years or 10 years.
Thank you. Very well explained.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ratna, for asking. Any question from other participants?
Okay, if I'm allowed, sorry.
Yeah.
Is my voice
We
heard?
can hear you.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation. I only want to ask that could we follow this logic into social science studies? As I know, in social science studies is at least in the qualitative process, at least qualitatively, we could still welcome a certain amount of bias while from what I listened to your presentation, this evidence synthesis is more likely to eliminate any possibility of bias. Then, so I'm quite interested, if we could follow this kind of logic into social science studies. I think that's it. I would really appreciate it.
Of course, we can apply evidence synthesis in social science studies. Evidence synthesis is not only for health science, it's for health science, it's for social science, it's for educational science, it's for environmental science, it's for everything. And if you more focus on qualitative findings, there is a specific method. I didn't talk about that much, but I mentioned that, which is known as QES, which is qualitative evidence synthesis. So where you actually consider the qualitative studies only and you synthesize, and they have different synthesis approach. The main things are pretty similar, like the search, but still there are some differences. Like you do lot many snowballing in qualitative evidence synthesis, snowballing search or citation tracking, and you have the screening process pretty similar. And then in the synthesis process, you have meta-ethnography, you have thematic analysis, you have framework analysis. So those are part of qualitative evidence synthesis. So the main thing is you can definitely do qualitative evidence synthesis within the field of social science, and the methodological limitations are also assessed in qualitative evidence synthesis. We do not name that as risk of bias assessment in QES, rather we say assess the methodological limitation.
I see. Thank you for answering.
Okay, so the evidence synthesis is not only for quantitative study, but also qualitative study as well. So there are some questions also in the chat box. The first question is from UPM, it's from Malaysia, Tan De Hui. The first question is, for meta-analysis, does all the effect size be standardized so that we can compare the result across studies? That is the first question. And the second
I will
one,
answer one by one. I will answer
Okay.
one by one. So yes, sometimes you need to standardize the effect size if it is measured using different scales. So sometimes in different studies, if your outcome is measured using different scales, so you need to standardize that.
Okay, so we can standardize that. And the second one, how about assessing heterogeneity after conducting meta-analysis? What software and analysis can we use for this? And how can we address the effect of heterogeneity on the pool effect size in the study?
So whenever you use any software like RevMan or Stata or R, so heterogeneity is automatically assessed by the software. The program is done in that way. So the heterogeneity will be assessed and it will be showing the heterogeneity. And you know that there are different measures of heterogeneity, like I-squared is one of the measures. And there's a rule of thumb that if I-square is more than 70%, then it is highly heterogeneous. If it is between 30 to 60, then it's moderately heterogeneous, like that. So if you get heterogeneity, so then you need to do the subgroup analysis to explore the reason for heterogeneity. And you can do subgroup analysis, you can do sometimes meta-regression, and thus you address the heterogeneity. So the purpose of subgroup analysis or meta-regression is to explore the factors which are responsible for this heterogeneity and try to explain your heterogeneity. So heterogeneity is not a concern, rather unexplained heterogeneity is a concern. So you need to try to explain what is the reason for your heterogeneity.
Okay, I think we already addressed the question from Tan De Hui, and some question, I think there are a lot of questions from Fauzia Bufau from National University. What are the common methods used in evidence synthesis for technology research?
So actually the methods are not focused on domain like technology research or other things. So the main method is same. The main method of evidence synthesis, the basic step is same that I described today. It depends on your scope and depends on your type of data sometimes. Like if it is qualitative research, then it's qualitative evidence synthesis. If quantitative, then systematic review meta-analysis. And so you can do evidence synthesis in technology research, and you can use this standard method. Or if you find that there are some uncertainties in synthesizing evidence in technology research, there is always a scope for establishing new method. That's why we do study within a review. And well, we always say that nothing is constant. So everything is being changed in this universe. The methods could be changed, but the thing is that you need to be transparent. You need to have the good rationale for what you are doing.
Okay, so any topic and any subjects can use the evidence synthesis, not only for, so today the example is in health study, but of course we can use it for any research, I guess. And then the third one from Mr. Dekri Firman, for the data collection, how to ensure that we get almost all of the data needed, if not 100%, to conduct the systematic review.
Well, this is a very good question. As I mentioned in your protocol, you specify which data would be extracted. You specify your outcomes and you specify everything that which data would be extracted. Then when the studies are included, you might not get all those data from those published reports. You need to explore all the resources. For example, if it is a clinical trial or randomized control trial, you need to explore whether there are multiple publications from one trial or not, whether there is a published protocol or not, whether there's a trial registration or not. So you need to identify all related sources. That is one thing. Even if you do not get all information from that data, so you need to contact with the authors that whether that has been measured or not. So you need to contact the authors, and if you're lucky, the authors will respond to you. If not, then you will be transparent in your reporting that you would mention, we were not sure about this data and we contacted the authors, but we didn't get any response. And usually the process is you contact the authors and provide them a reminder within 15 days. And with one reminder, if you do not get any response, then you report it that we tried to contact the authors and didn't get any response from them. But again, all these things should be written in your protocol, that what will you do if there is not enough data, or if there is, if you think that there is a reporting bias, or whether you are not sure whether the data was measured in the study or not. So all these things should be written transparently in your protocol, and you will do accordingly.
Okay, so the most important thing is to put all of the things inside the protocol, right? I think we can move to the next question from Bangladesh, from Kaushik, Mr. Kaushik. Hello, I'm from Bangladesh. I would like to mention that I would like to mention that was a really great overview of the evidence synthesis process. I have attended several workshops on systematic review and co-author a scoping review last year, but this one was really amazing. I got to learn something new from this webinar, especially swim, SWAR, etc. Thank you so much, Mr. Shaif or Shaif Bai, for the wonderful presentation and spark up my question further. I think it's not the question, but just yeah. And thank you
Thank you.
for attending this webinar, Mr. Kaushik. Okay, I think we can move to the next question from Bayar Policy. How do technology and software support the process of evidence synthesis and systematic review? Are there any effective and commonly used software tools available? Thank you.
I have already mentioned a couple of them. So far, we use Ryan for screening, Covidence for screening. There is Epi Reviewer for screening and data extraction as well. Ryan, Covidence, you can also use for data extraction as well. We use RevMan for meta-analysis, but RevMan is, if you only do a Cochrane systematic review, then you can use RevMan. There's a free version in RevMan, but the projects are like gone within 1 month. And you can use Stata for meta-analysis. You can use R for meta-analysis. So these are the software which helps in different steps of evidence synthesis. And nowadays we are doing research on how AI tools could be utilized for doing evidence synthesis. And even one of my PhD student is doing her PhD on AI in evidence synthesis, and there are a lot many works are going on utilization of AI tools in evidence synthesis. But till now, there's no validated AI tool so far. But very soon, we hope that we will have the validated AI tools for doing evidence synthesis.
Okay, yeah. So there are a lot of software can be used for the evidence synthesis. Okay. The last question, I guess, from Mr. Dekri Firmansyah. Is it okay that can we get the copy of your slide? If it's
You can
possible,
obviously.
or
You can obviously, but I just want to say one thing. Like initially, even in my life, I have tried these things that I collected all the slides and other things, but actually that doesn't work that much. Okay, rather, if you pick up some key points and then you explore by yourself, you will learn more. Like I have mentioned about many things. I have mentioned many software, many methods and other things. Now, if you explore by yourself, you will learn more. But yes, sometimes slides are also helpful for that exploration. So I'm fine, and I'll provide the slides. I'll provide it to Sari, and I think Sari will provide it to all participants.
Yeah, sure. So I think just collecting the slide is without doing anything will not. I think we should explore more by ourselves rather than just collecting the slides, and attending the webinar is just starting point, and then you need to explore by yourself, I guess. Isn't it, Saif?
Yeah, of course, I do agree.
Okay, so any question? I think we already almost 1 hour of this webinar session, explanation, question, and answer. So I would like to sum up a little bit of our discussion today. For the evidence synthesis, it's kind of like I mentioned, it's very broad. There are a lot of studies that included in this evidence synthesis, and Saif already mentioned the steps of the evidence synthesis, including the first one is define the questions, and then the second one is plan the eligibility criteria, and then plan the methods, and then search for the studies itself, and then after that we apply the eligibility criteria, and then collect the data. And then the next one is assessing studies for risk of bias, and it's very important. And then analyze and present the results using several statistical software that he already mentioned, and then interpret. The last one is to improve and update the review, even within 5 years or 10 years, if the studies have been developed after that. And I think it's finished for today. It's thank you so much for Saif for having. Okay, the last one. I think before I think, is it okay to have one more question? I think
Yeah,
Mr.
perfect, perfect.
Have one more question. For a systematic review, how recent should the search result be before they are considered valid for the publication process? I mean, how old is considered old enough?
If you mention, if you mean the search date, so ideally it should be published within 1 year of your latest search. So if the search is 1 year old, then you get difficulties in publishing it. So most of the reviewers, most of the journals will request you to update the search. So standard is 1 year. So Cochrane review, they keep the process like they accept if it is just within 1 year. And that is for the search date. And if you mention about the search time frame, then actually it should be from the inception to till date or to the latest date. So we should not limit our search usually, but sometimes if it is dependent on the topic, like if an intervention is introduced in 2015, so there's no way of searching that behind that. So you can search in that case, but you should have your rationale. Why are you searching from that specific date? Or for example, if you're doing something on COVID-19, so there's no meaning of searching before 2020 because the first articles on COVID-19 were published since 2020. So thus you can limit your search time frame, but you need to provide your rationale for that. Why is that time frame being utilized?
I see. So the rationale is important there. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Koshik, and also for Dr. Saif for having a very insightful explanation today about the evidence synthesis. And thank you for all the participants. And I will give it back to Miss Xiaomi as the MC today. Thank you so much.
Okay. I also wanted to say thank you to Mr. Sai for the very insightful presentation on evidence synthesis and systematic reviews. And also thank you to Ms. Fitri Kurniasari for leading the discussion in today's webinar. I also wanted to give a quick summary, not much different from what Ms. Fitri have mentioned earlier. So evidence synthesis involves gathering and combining findings from multiple studies to provide a comprehensive understanding of a specific topic. It can be used in qualitative and quantitative research, helping researchers and policymakers make evidence-based decisions. Evidence synthesis includes various of methods. One of them is systematic reviews. The process of evidence synthesis starts with define the question, plan eligibility criteria, plan methods, search for studies, apply eligibility criteria, collect data, assess studies for risk of bias, analyze and present results, interpret results, and draw conclusion, and continuously update the review with new evidence by 3 until 10 years. We hope all the material presented today can enrich our knowledge and provide valuable insight that can be applied when conducting research or scientific writing. Next, we will have a documentation session to capture this happy moment. To the operator, please proceed with the documentation.
Okay. We will take a picture of everyone. Please kindly open your camera if possible. One, two, and three. Okay, we will take a second slide. One, two, and three. Okay, thank you everyone.
Okay, thank you to the operator. Moving on, participants are requested to fill out the attendance and satisfaction survey, which can be seen on the screen. The attendance form will be open for 2 minutes, so please make sure to fill it out promptly. All right, 2 minutes have passed. Thank you to all participants who have filled out the attendance and satisfaction survey. With the completion of the attendance and survey session, we have now reached the end of second series of this webinar. Thank you all participants for staying with us until the end of the event. I, Shomi Mafira, as today's MC, would like to take my leave. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Santi 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 Om, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. See you at the next webinar series with more interesting topic. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Saif. Oh,
Thank you so much.
thank you.
Mbak Fitri, makasih ya.